Regional communities across the country are dealing with what's been described as the worst drought in living memory. The situation is placing a huge strain on the mental health of those affected. A lack of awareness and access to treatment makes rural communities more vulnerable to the effects of mental illness. And the suicide rate is more than 50% higher outside Australia's capital cities. For more, we're joined by the Director of the Centre for Rural and Remote Mental Health, Professor David Perkins. Thanks for your time tonight. We know drought is crippling farmers, particularly in New South Wales and Queensland. What do we know about the impact that has on their mental health?
Well, we know that it's an impact that takes a long time because the problem with drought is it's not like a fire or flood, which comes very quickly and has an immediate effect. It's a cumulative effect that builds up sometimes over many years. We spoke to a farmer recently who said he hadn't had any rain for coming up to 7 years. So you can see how this impacts on their ability to make decisions, on the farmers' concerns and anxieties about whether there will be rain, about investment decisions, about whether to destock. So it impacts on all those things that are central to one's confidence in one's future, and it impacts on one's mental health, but in a slow and in a very damaging way.
And so is enough being done right now to assist those, like that farmer you mentioned, who are struggling mentally because of the drought?
Well, I think the sorts of things we normally do is to provide funds for people's subsistence, for their living costs, and we sometimes provide them with funds for transporting grain and hay and other sorts of things. And I think one of the issues is we still have a long way to go in getting organised so that they can find the sort of help they need, and perhaps even find the help they need at the farm gate, rather than having to perhaps drive many kilometres into town and then get an appointment with the doctor and then perhaps need other sorts of services.
Because that's one of the key problems, isn't it? It's access to services. Would something like an online service help in terms of people who can't get, as you said, to a doctor, or who have to travel long distances to make an appointment? Is an online service the answer?
I think an online service might be part of the answer, but I don't think it's the answer. It's a very easy answer, I think, from a city perspective, to say, well, the rural and remote people can get online and can get services in that way. And there are some excellent online services, including the MindSpot Clinic, and the government has got a new gateway for online services. But nonetheless, this is not an easy, straightforward solution. And really, we need solutions that are local and that are available where farmers and others live in rural and remote towns.
What strategies are in place for preventing suicide, which happens in alarming rates the further away you move from the city?
Yep. Well, my centre have been very concerned about this because, as you're aware, the rates in rural and remote areas are as much as 2 times as high as the rates in our main capital cities, and the rates for Aboriginal people are twice that again. And we tend to focus on an individual-based approach, which means trying to find somebody who is in a bad way and to identify them, to provide them with care, and to try and change their course of action, change their purpose. And we are also quite good at addressing people who've been bereaved by suicide. But we've got to think quite hard about what are we going to do in the medium term, because the evidence that our centre has been looking at suggests that, broadly speaking, the rates of rural and the rates of metropolitan suicide have been about the same for maybe 60, 70 years. And so if we're going to make a real difference, we have to do something that is different to what we're doing at the moment. What
are some of the warning signs people should look out for?
Well, if people start isolating themselves, if people stop communicating, if people are not sleeping, if they're not, as it were, behaving as they normally do, if they're essentially, if you notice that there's something seriously wrong. But I think the other point to make is we have to think hard about how we're going to identify people and care for people, but we have to do some other things as well. And we can't assume that your local general practitioner who is sitting in a rural town or visiting a remote settlement can identify somebody and has the time to care for them in the ways that we need. And even more GPs won't actually solve that problem. It seems to us that it's, if you like, just as it might take a village to raise a child, it might take a community to prevent suicide.
Professor David Perkins, we thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much indeed.
And if you need information or support, you can contact Beyond Blue on 1300 22 46 36, or if you or someone you know is experiencing distress, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14.